Tonight on Greater Boston, a 35-year-old law most had forgotten about is prompting the state to return billions in surplus taxes to the taxpayers, with the highest earners getting huge checks, lower wage earners not so much. Is this really the best way? State Senator Sonia Chang-Díaz and former Mass GOP Chair Jennifer Nassour debate. Plus, Globe business columnist Shirley Leung and Ranjay Gulati of Harvard Business School join me to talk about the very different views on new normals of the post-pandemic workplace. If you paid taxes in Massachusetts, you'll likely be getting a piece of a roughly $3 billion pie over the next couple of months. Back in June, before lawmakers on Beacon Hill broke for their biennial months-long vacation, they were taking a closer look at the nearly $5 billion tax surplus the state's sitting on. They were working on a bill that would have given back roughly $500 million of it, mostly to lower and middle income residents in $250 and $500 checks. But then came an announcement from Governor Charlie Baker. The 1986 tax cap law, which limits the amount of tax revenue the state can keep. It was only triggered once before, back in 1987, and then for only small change. $29 million. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, I was a firm opponent of this law back when it was passed via ballot question in '86, so much so that I led a lawsuit to try and get it overturned. But every single state Supreme Judicial Court justice disagreed with me then. And so now, instead of the money going to the people struggling the most with the rising prices of pretty much everything, when the checks go out, likely in November, people who make more money will get a lot more money back. And the governor thinks that's the way it should be, as he told Marjorie Egan and me yesterday on Boston Public Radio.
The policy is the policy. It was voted on by the voters, and it should be implemented accordingly. If people want to change it at some point afterwards, that's probably a conversation that's worth having.
I'm joined now by State Senator Sonia Chang-Díaz and Jennifer Nassour. Jennifer's the former chair of the Mass Republican Party and founder and president of the Pocketbook Project. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having her.
Jennifer, starting with you. So if nothing changes in the legislature sometime in a month or two, everybody who paid taxes last year will get roughly 13% of what they paid back, which means people at the top get a lot more, people in low and middle income ranges get a lot less. Is that the way it should be, as the governor suggested?
Absolutely. That's exactly what the governor has said. Is the people voted it in, and this is how it is. Now, I think one of the things we need to clarify is the people who get more money back are also the people who paid more in taxes. And so they're owed what they paid erroneously. And so I think what's fair is fair. And if we have the same tax bracket, then those folks get back their money that they had paid.
Senator, it's not just the former chair of the Republican Party in the state and the Republican governor. It seems to me the Democratic nominee for governor, you ran against her for a while, agrees. Here she is, Maura Healey, on the night of her primary election win. Here she is.
The people voted recently to give everyone in the state tax relief if the state had excess revenue. And it looks like we do. So the people should get that money back as soon as possible.
Is she right?
Well, Jim, look, a few months ago, I, too, in the Senate voted to support tax rebates to Massachusetts residents. I think that it is a, sort of commonsensical principle, right, that when we have a surplus this large, that some of that should go back to taxpayers. The question, though, Jim, is when this is a $5 billion surplus on paper. And that is a once-in-a-lifetime, if that, occurrence in this state. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Massachusetts to take a quantum leap or two on some of the things that voters, just huge consensus, right, have been telling Beacon Hill for a long time that they really want to see.
So what does that mean operationally? What would that mean? Spending money on some of that money on a spectrum of services? Is that what you mean?
That's exactly what I mean. We have a $10 billion state of good repair backlog in our transportation systems, right? Our roads, bridges, our transit. We got people jumping out of burning trains into the, river below. We have, massive racial and economic wealth divides. We have municipal workers, carpenters who cannot afford to live in the communities that they have built up over the years. We've got young people sitting in emergency rooms for weeks on end because they cannot get a mental health provider. These are huge problems that voters have have been talking to us about vociferously for a long time. So should we send some of that money back to taxpayers? Yes. And that's what the legislature, both the House and the Senate, voted to do in July. I wish we would come back into session, right, to finish that package. But is it responsible budgeting to route $3 billion, through this automatic formula that we haven't, nobody's talked about or looked at in nearly 40 years? I just don't believe it is.
Well, so just to be clear, Senators, the reason the vast majority of your colleagues are not saying what you're saying is because they think that just returning it is the right thing to do, or they don't want to interrupt their 5-month vacation?
Well, Jim, I see what you did there. And, I can, of course, speak for 199 other members of the legislature. I do know from, many conversations that I've had with colleagues that they share the broad strokes of the opinion that I just outlined, right, that some of the money does need to go back. And again, I think that's evidenced by the vote that we all took in the legislature in July on tax rebates, on a tax package, but also that there are huge investments that need to happen. We are unfortunately caught in this time bind where we are out of formal session, which doesn't mean everybody's just on the beach eating bonbons, for these months. But we're out of formal session, doing other kinds of work in the district, right, in the State House. I wish, and I've been on record on this, and many others do, that we would come back into a special session in order to sort this out, because this is a huge amount of money. And again, a once in a lifetime opportunity for us in Massachusetts to pay down some really, or to make investments in really big holes.
Jennifer, when we had the governor on the radio show yesterday, what the start of this conversation was whether or not the money should go back to the taxpayers in checks, for example, a direct deposit in November, or as a credit on their income taxes next year. And his response was, the reason it's got to happen soon is because people are in need, they're hurting, etc. But the people who are hurting are not getting the most of this money. I want to follow up on that. A couple of charts. This from the Mass Budget and Policy Center. 72% of this $3 billion is going to go to the top 20%, less than 1% to the bottom 1%. And let's break it down by income. If you make more than $1 million, you'll get at least $22,000 back. If you're the middle 20%, you'll get $200 back. And if you're the bottom 20%, I would argue those people most in need, you get a grand total of $9. And while what you said before, Jennifer, is obviously true, the people who paid the most are getting the most, those are the people in least need. That's what Massachusetts should be doing?
No. But first of all, that's your assessment that they're.
It's not my assessment. Those are the numbers.
No, but it is, because if you're a business owner, who are you, Jim, to say that business owner doesn't have payroll to meet and that the taxes that they paid, they shouldn't get back? Or the single parent who is raising children, who is working hard and needs that money for exactly the same cost that the senator was talking about. But
she's much more likely to be making $40,000, not $1,040,000.
Wait, and no disrespect to the senator, but number one, the reason that our legislature is not in session is because it is incumbent protection that they all need to get into their districts and they need to go and campaign at this time instead of making difficult decisions. That's number one. Number two, I mean, again, no disrespect, but why is the legislature, why are those members, those 200 members, smarter than the voters who voted this in previously?
Jennifer, it's a law. Like any other.
How did those legislators not know that this was going to be triggered?
By the voters, but it's a law like anything else. And I think one of the things legislators are elected to do.
Jim, if there were rocket scientists and there were accountants and there were financial people that were elected to office in Massachusetts, they would have known that once our revenue had hit over $38 million, that $38 billion, that we were going to set off this
Jennifer,
tax
even
rebate.
Governor Baker didn't know it until the last minute. Senator, can I go to you for a second?
Can
I go to you for a second? I know you don't speak for your colleagues. The vast majority of your colleagues are supporting the Fair Share Amendment, question one, the so-called millionaires tax, which essentially is the exact opposite in terms of equity from what this return via the tax cap is. Do they not understand the internal contradiction there?
No, I don't think it's that, Jim. I mean, I think it's important to separate these two questions, right? Because what we're talking about with the 62F law is a one-time, it's a one-time maybe it will happen again in 40 years, who knows, right? But it's a one-time rebate, whereas the Fair Share Amendment is talking about making, an ongoing change in our tax law to make it more progressive, to make it like, more like the federal tax system that's graduated. I can't tell you how many people in Massachusetts are shocked, right, when they learn that we have a flat tax in Massachusetts and that our income tax system is more regressive than the federal income tax. But that's a very different question than this, one-time rebate law. I understand what you're saying, that, one is regressive and one is progressive. I do think there is, good command of that dynamic among my colleague legislators. And my sense is that the blocker here is really this time problem, right, where we have this rule in the legislature. And look, I'm no fan of incumbent protection. I came into office running against an incumbent, 14 years ago. But the reason that we have this rule in the legislature is actually to, guard against legislative mischief, right, of, sort of hasty and maybe patronage-related laws being passed right on the doorstep of election time, right?
For whatever it's worth, Senator, the governor said exactly what you said yesterday. He actually defended this 5-month, let's call it hiatus, to be polite. Jennifer, we only have a minute left. In addition to this $3 billion, the governor's got a tax package that people like the senator are considering, which would return another $700 million to renters, to people who have to pay the estate tax, to people who have dependent and child care expenses. Plus, there's this measure, that $250 and $500 check that I talked about, those rebates that were voted into the economic development bill that never passed. Should all of that go back to the taxpayer without any of it being invested, like the senator suggested? Quickly, if you can.
Yes, all of the money should get refunded to the taxpayers as per the law. That is what the law is, and that's what the taxpayers should get back. And again, when we go to the millionaires tax that's on the ballot in November, people really need to know more about this, because it is going to hurt all of those mom and pop businesses in the same areas that the senator represents. It's going to hurt all of our businesses in all of our little towns around, in the 351 cities and towns around the state. And so we really need to be very cautious about just thinking that we should just spend hardworking people's money.
Jennifer, you'll be very happy to hear that next week we'll have a debate, because there's another side to that question. I think the senator's on that other side. Senator Chang-Díaz, Jennifer Nassour, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
It's not exactly breaking news that the working world has changed dramatically over the past few years, but as we settle into our new normal, version 5 or 6 or 7.0 now, expectations about just what work should look like vary dramatically. While some want to be in the office all the time, others want nothing to do with leaving their home office setup. Working hours, negotiable for some, a hard and fast 9 to 5 for others. And just how much of your personal life should you share these days with colleagues, managers, or subordinates? Well, depends on who you ask. So what will the office of the future post-pandemic look like? I'm joined by Shirley Leung, business columnist for the Boston Globe. Ranjay Gulati is a professor of business administration at Harvard Business School and author of Deep Purpose, the heart and soul of high-performance companies. Thank you both for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
So, Ranjay, starting with you, 2.5 years in, what do people want the office of the future to look like? What are the common threads coming out of the pandemic?
I think there's several things we've learned is that the pandemic has forced a great rethink among a lot of people, right? Confronting death, confronting, dislocation, your own mortality, has forced a rethink among several segments of the population. It began actually with people near retirement. So there was a big kind of a early retirement movement, that part. But there's also happening among younger populations as well, who are kind of, some of them are expecting that, do I really need to go into work? I feel I'm comfortable where I am. And I think this is putting a lot of pressure on companies because, companies thrive on standardization. One size fits all.
Sure.
We're not used to bespoke, you get this deal and you get that deal and everybody's got a deal. And now suddenly I'm struggling to create equity, parity. And so it's really complicating things for a lot of companies.
Shirley, what do you think are the common threads. I think that Ranjay touched on one, is that it's not one size fits all anymore, but is it increased flexibility? What are the common threads from most people who've worked through this past 2.5 years?
I mean, I think it's absolutely number one is increased flexibility. Many workers got used to working from home in the beginning in their pajamas, right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even have, and then they could just zoom in. And now a lot of companies are asking workers to come back to work, and it's a hard transition. And for Gen Z, the very youngest employees, a lot of them have never come to the office. This is a completely new expectation for them, and so that's why you see them on TikTok, voicing and being outspoken about how unhappy they are at work and how there's got to be more to life than this 9-to-5 drudgery. I mean, Ranjay talked about the great resignation at the older end, and at the younger end, you're seeing quiet quitting.
By the way, the Gen Z piece in the Globe yesterday, some great quotes from the youngest of workers. We pulled together a few. It's super repetitive, meaning the 9-to-5 life. It's soul-sucking. I don't want to accept my fate. You were not put on this earth to work at the office 8 hours a day for 40 years. I want to return to the number of hours in a minute, but Ranjay, employers seem to be accommodating as best they can some of these demands, for lack of a better word, from employees. But what I'm not sure about it, is it because they actually believe it's possible and good for their company, or because they see it as an emergency proposition to ensure that they can both hire and retain workers at this stage of the pandemic?
I think depending on which sector you go to, but there are a lot of companies where this is dire. Talent acquisition, retention has become a dire situation, and the early warning signs are in there. And let's think about what companies need to be thinking about. We all focus in on pay. And yes, there's a segment of people who are quitting because of low wages. The low wage segment of the market is quitting because of that. But I think pay is one piece of the puzzle. People expect more out of work. So the second piece of it is, give me interesting work where I have responsibility, I'm in a positive work environment. But a larger one is, help me find purpose. Is there intrinsic value in what I'm doing? How am I contributing to something more than just shareholders? So suddenly you see expectations of people from what they want to get out of work changing. And if we can't step up to it, the companies can't, they're going to lose out on some of the best talent who will go somewhere else where they can find that.
Shirley, for the companies who don't get it, what I would say to that CEO is, if I talked to you 3 years ago and told you that a hybrid working situation was the norm, you would have said, totally impossible. It'll destroy our culture, destroy our productivity, and they would have been wrong on both counts. So are they realizing that there is a new world, and they should accept it not just to be better to their workers, but because it may be better for the workplace as well?
I think a lot of companies recognize some form of hybrid workplace is here to stay. But I don't know if the what we see today, the 2 days or 3 days in the work week, work in the office, 2 or 3 days at home, I'm not sure if that's going to be our new normal. I think right now we're going through a lot of growing pains of trying to figure out what is the right balance. And you see a spectrum of kind of schedules. Some companies, their employees are only coming in once a month or 1 week a month. And so in addition to the great rethink, it's a great experimentation of scheduling.
But Ranjay, I want to stay on that topic for a second. It seems to me there is never, I don't care how far down the line it is, going to be a full return to the office. I don't know if you saw, I know you're in Greece, I don't know if you saw the Globe today. We're the state with the fourth highest rate percentage of workers who are working from home. Washington, D.C. is by far number one. We're practically tied for number two with Washington State. A story in Forbes said 90% of current workers want to work from home at least 1 day a week. That's a permanent part of the workplace going forward, is it not?
I think there is. I think there is a reset. I think there is going to be some percentage of people who will want some percentage of time they can work flexibly. But I do think what you said earlier is also important, that as we move into this world, cultures will have to change. This idea that my culture won't get wrecked, it is causing tremendous stress and strain on company culture. And when you have some people working remotely, new employees who are not acclimated, assimilated into the organization, it's really hard to make them part of the culture.
Well, not only make them part of the culture, but let's stay, Shirley, you mentioned the Gen Z workers, and I quoted from the Globe story. One would argue the workers who most need, those workers, I would argue, collaboration, mentoring in person, are the ones that are most resistant to it. So how is the twain going to meet there?
Well, I think it's what Ranjay has been studying and researching, is that companies have to find a way to help their employees develop a sense of deep purpose. Why are we at work? What is the mission here? And really inspire their employees. And those young employees need that right now, especially since many have been working from home. And so I think employees, CEOs, employers have to really think about that. Think about, how do I connect with and engage employees in a way that we haven't before.
Shirley, is there going to be a big expansion of the 4-day work week, which, as you know, is my personal crusade? Is that going to happen?
I don't know, but there's global pilots, right? Mm-hmm. On the 4-day work week, but I think that will be part of the experimentation. Is that a better way to work for, especially some of these younger workers?
Ranjay, one of the topics that I think is most important, at least in my estimation, has been underexplored, is when we ultimately settle into whatever that post-pandemic workplace is, there's going to be a lot of tension between those of us, like me, who have the freedom to work from virtually anywhere, and my coworker who has to be physically at the office or the factory or whatever the workplace is. Are companies thinking about how to resolve that internal tension?
I think you're touching on what I think is going to be a key issue going forward. How do you create equity and parity in a marketplace which is used to standardization for everybody? But it's not only that, hey, the person who has more flexibility is somehow advantaged. In other ways, they may get disadvantaged. So when it comes to their annual review and appraisals, how are they considered? Lack of face time means what for them? Lack of networks. All the water cooler networks means, can they get work done? Are they really part of the story in the organization?
Yeah, but if I may, I understand that they may be disadvantaged, but the one thing that is indisputable, they'll have the freedom to decide which circumstance is best for them. That second set of workers won't. That's the tension I'm talking about.
And that's a real tension. And I'll tell you what's going to happen there is that organizations are in a competition for talent right now. And those that are willing to, and you're absolutely right that they're going to either leave, but it's also going to create tension within the organization about social comparison, saying, why can, Shirley have a 3-day work week and I got to come in 5 days a week? And what does that mean for me? So it creates inequity internally in a multiple sets of ways inside the organization.
Okay, we only have a minute left, starting with you, Shirley. It's Nostradamus time. 5 years from now, you and Ranjay are back. You'll be back before, but in 5 years, you're back as well. What's the single most important change in the office of the future?
Oh, that is good. That's a really good question. Let's see. I think flexibility will be here to stay. Yeah. And I think I have to hand it to the Gen Z generation. They've been able to voice. They are saying things that Gen Z baby boomers weren't willing to say about their unhappiness about the workplace. So I feel like there'll be more of a dialogue between employees and employer and bosses about what's important, what's not, how to make the workplace a better place for everybody.
Okay, Ranjay, what's the biggest difference 5 years down the line as compared to, let's say, 2019?
Work-life balance is dead. And what I mean by that is this work-life balance idea where there's work and there's life, which are compartmentalized, which means work is not life. People will expect more from work. They're going to look for meaning out of work, and work is going to be part of life. We're going to look for purpose in our work as much as we look for purpose in everything else we do outside of work. And organizations that don't deliver that are going to lose some of their top talent.
You say it quite beautifully. It sounds quite appealing. Ranjay Gulati, Shirley Leung, great to see you both. Thanks for your time.
See you in 5 years, Jim, on this topic.
See you.
And you, Ranjay, too.
The 4th annual Boston Cannabis Week has just wrapped up, showcasing just some of how the marijuana industry has expanded in Massachusetts since legalization. And as GBH Morning Edition host Paris Alston recently found, cannabis is finding its way into a growing number of products.
Barbecue sauce, seltzer, 2 backyard summer party staples. But depending on how you get down, yours may be missing one key ingredient: cannabis.
When we think about cannabis, we're thinking about celebrations and, getting together with friends.
That's Andy Husbands, who jiggles the brisket as the pitmaster at the Smoke Shop Barbecue.
The way I was just kind of jiggling it is that's how you know it's done.
And now you have the option of adding a little something extra to the mix, thanks to the Smoke Shop's partnership with Bountiful Farms, which infuses some of its barbecue sauce with cannabis.
It's going through a refinement process. Okay. So it's basically very similar to how they would make whiskey or how they would make alcohol.
That's Zachary Taylor, the general manager of cultivation at Bountiful Farms, a grow facility in Lakeville that houses more than 2,000 cannabis plants, and recently won the title for Best Grass in Mass. Now, Taylor wants to expand the idea of how cannabis is consumed.
Barbecue is something that is a passion-driven food and also is something that's meant to be shared. And you don't necessarily make a brisket just for yourself and a couple friends. And so cannabis is that same way.
But cannabis isn't just going into food these days.
83 miles north in Georgetown, one company is trying to make cannabis the beverage of choice.
It's a seltzer company called Levia, which operates almost like a brewery.
People are just used to drinking things when they get together, and it's a very social way to consume. Our beverage kicks in fairly quickly, about 12 to 15 minutes, and you know what you'll feel like for the next 2 hours.
Oh yeah, it's just like a regular seltzer.
Now, to be clear, the ones we tried were uninfused. But for the ones that are infused, as CEO Troy Brosnan explains, each formula is labeled with taglines based on the type of cannabis in them and how they'll make you feel.
So Achieve is our sativa, and Get Things Done is kind of the tagline that goes with it. Celebrate is our hybrid, so we kind of feel like it speaks for itself. And then Dream, just really couch lock, indica, go to sleep, and dream. So we tried to really make it as simple for people as possible, because we think that education is really hard in this space.
Dr. Uma Dhanabalan agrees. She's a physician and certified cannabinoid medicine specialist and notes even the same product can have very different effects from one person to the next.
It is a learning curve. It's a bit of trial and error and understanding how the different products work, how long will it last, how quickly will you feel it.
And eating or drinking is a lot different than smoking.
When you inhale, lungs gets right into the brain stream. That's why you feel it right away, but it's short on. When you ingest it, it has to go through the digestive system.
That means it takes longer to feel and longer to wear off. For GBH News, I'm Paris Alston.
That's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you much for watching, and please don't forget Ukraine.